everyone, this is Lomi, and today I am going to be sewing the dress I made a pattern for last week. I've had this piece of satin for several years, waiting for me to make this dress for my doll Lumia. This was always the kind of dress she was supposed to have, and I couldn't tell you why I didn't make it sooner, but recently I was going through some old artwork and I found a really rough, unfinished sketch of the character. I did the sketch back in 2014, so yeah, I've had this plan for a while. I've been a little sad by how much stuff I've started and never finished. I recently completed all my unfinished sewing projects, so now it's time to work on unfinished other stuff too, I guess, which includes getting this doll put together the way I really want her. So I start the sewing process by finishing the back of the dress because this is the easiest time to do it. At first I was just going to sew the facing on and leave it, but I decided afterward that I should finish the edges of the satin because of how easily it frays. Doll clothing doesn't get a lot of wear and tear, so for some fabrics fraying isn't a problem, but satin frays if you breathe on it, so it's probably important here. Pinking shears would probably also work, but I didn't see mine handy, so I did something else. If you're not familiar with this character, Lumia is one of the characters from my epic fantasy series, The Snake's Blood Saga. She is the queen that Rune serves, and he is, of course, my favorite doll, favorite character, he gets a lot of attention here. My doll version of Lumia is an Imple doll Lydia, and she has not gotten a ton of attention since she got here, just like a face-up and one outfit, so it's time to do a little bit more with her. I finger pressed the fabric so the opening was right side out, and then top stitching holds that lining in place. A fairly common source of frustration in doll sewing is that it's hard to get the fabric to lay really nicely when it's tiny little pieces, and it can often be challenging to iron them as well. Finger pressing goes a long way to making sure that your seams lay nicely, even if you don't have an iron handy, and when you're working on something as small as doll clothing, that's usually enough to get a pretty good result. But everything lays better on the doll itself if you take the time to press it very thoroughly after the whole garment is sewn. In human size, the pressing in between seams is not really something you can skip because the pieces tend to be way too big to do any sort of finger pressing. But one thing that can make doll clothing a little bit easier to press is to use a tailor's ham. In the past, I have used rolled up kitchen towels as a makeshift ham, but I think I might sew myself one in the near future just because it would be a really handy tool to have. So if that's something you're interested in learning about or seeing me make, drop me a comment, let me know, and we'll see if I can fit it in the schedule. The doll is such an exaggerated silhouette that I think this back will mostly close and just be a really narrow V when it's laced up. I didn't want to use eyelets as they're prone to scratching dolls, and this won't have any layers or any way to protect her from it, so I ended up using my machine's automatic buttonholes to make little round eyelet holes instead, and I'll just lace up the dress with those. The front piece of the dress got cut with a lot of extra at the top because that becomes a facing for the cowl, so there won't be any visible raw edges in the part that hangs. That gets finished with a zigzag, and then the shoulder seams go together. I just fold the facing so it lays where I want it, sewn into the shoulder seam there. Even though I really like this fabric, I can tell early on that it's not going to do exactly what I want for this outfit because even though it's a thinner satin, it's not going to drape as smoothly as I'd like in doll scale, so I may someday remake this with a lightweight georgette type fabric or something that will drape better. But I also don't want to spend forever waiting for conditions to be perfect because they never will be, and this year has been so full of struggles and challenges that I figure it's best to take what wins I can find. And getting this doll back together and dressed up and on display once more will definitely be one. I finish all my seams with a zigzag on the edge to prevent fraying, except the bottom edges, which will get a rolled hem. The armholes on this one ended up being a little difficult to sew because of how steep the curve was in a few places, but it works out fine in the end. A lot of the time, it's just a matter of slowing down to make sure I don't go off the edge or miss stitches or anything like that. Once the armholes are closed, I can just pin the sides shut and sew them closed too, just from the bottom of the armhole down to the top of what will become the side slit opening. It's kind of funny, but when I first showed some friends the dress after I had it done, they were like, no, you need a slit for her leg to show. So I had to explain it was there, I just haven't ironed the dress, so it doesn't lay as nicely as it will. I actually still haven't ironed it even though it's done, just because I couldn't tell you where my iron is right now. We always have some kind of big home improvement project going on, and I don't have a space in my studio for an ironing board. Though, now that I've rearranged it, I've thought maybe I should get a small one that mounts on the closet door or something, so it's sort of put away, and then get a little mini iron that'll work better for doll clothes because it's small. Something to put on the Christmas list anyway. The rolled hem for the edge of the skirt I don't measure, but I fold it at roughly 1/4 inch. It doesn't matter a whole lot if it's perfect. This material is so slippery that it's hard to do more than one seam at a time, so instead of sewing around the whole bottom in one go like I usually would, and having to fight to turn the corners at the bottom, I just finish the side slits first and then the bottom edges of the skirt. This isn't as pretty of a finish as it would be if I tucked the corners, but it's fine. I'm not really chasing perfection here. And that's pretty much it for making this dress. It's super simple and goes together really easy. I used a leather punch to make holes in the stitched eyelet spots and then laced up the dress on the doll. Even with that exaggerated plunge down to the hip line, it's super tight and hard to get the outfit up over her hips. And after how the extreme measurements gave me trouble in the pattern drafting stage, I'm not surprised. But it does go on, and on the whole, it looks nice when it's on the doll. The fabric will lay better once I do figure out where my iron got put for this round of house fixing. And one thing I'll be doing is pinning the cowl front and then pressing the folds in place, so this part will not really move around. Once you crease satin, it likes to hold that shape pretty much forever, so it'll hang a lot better. In the book, I wrote that Lumia is often barefoot, so that means I don't need to do anything else for her. She's back to her glorious self and ready for some photos I had in mind. I'm looking forward to doing some photography, and that's a nice, low-impact project to work on while I'm wrapping up stuff for my book Kickstarter that just finished running on Monday. But I'll tell you about that next time, because that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.